one of the biggest questions that I get asked, in fact, not just me, I think it's one of the biggest questions that we ask, is what is God's will for my life? And that question, I wish I had like a detailed plan. Like you could come to me and I'd say, okay, well, we're going to work through this and we're going to take it in chapters and we're going to be very specific and this is exactly what God wants. But it doesn't work like that. God's will, His very specific and detailed will for your individual life, well, that's going to unfold over time. And the Lord is going to take you down different paths and He's going to show you different things. And as it unfolds, it's going to be the greatest adventure and journey that you've ever been on. But with that not being clear, with us not having the detailed plan for that, and that's just not how God works, we mustn't think that there aren't very clear instructions that God has given. And when we don't have clarity on all of those things, it helps to go back to the things that we do have clarity on. And we're going to look at some of God's clear instructions and then ask, well, am I at least obeying those? And what you'll find is as you start paying attention to those things, the unfolding of the detail and the journey starts happening. And you start following God's will for your life. So Philippians chapter 2 verse 14 gives us one of those really clear instructions. And this is what it says. It says, do all things without complaining and disputing or arguing. And that's pretty clear. And when it says all things, like it literally means all things. Don't complain about stuff. Now, we're going to touch on a bit of a sore topic here, because when we start speaking about complaining, you might have somebody in your life that you're like, yeah, Warren, I know who you're talking about. Like, there's this person. When I see them, I run. I know I'm in for it, because all they're going to do is it's going to be this like outpouring of negativity. But before we start pointing fingers and looking at other people, let's first just take stock. And let me ask some questions. Have you ever caught yourself complaining? Like you start talking about something and after a little while you realize like, I'm sounding quite negative. Like I didn't intend to, like I started the conversation, I was fine, but now I've gone down this path and I'm like, like sentence after sentence, it's just this dread and this darkness and this negativity. And I'm like, even I'm feeling down. I've felt that where the intention wasn't to be negative, but then after a while, well, that's just where I am. Sometimes it starts with small things, like the weather's terrible today, and like, and the traffic, I was stuck in traffic, and then this, and it's almost like these negative thoughts are like magnets. They attract each other, and before you know it, it's your job, it's your life, it's your wife, it's your family, it's everything. Now, hopefully it's not that bad, but sometimes when we start going down those paths, it's difficult to stop. Now, maybe you have caught yourself on a path like that, or maybe you have people in your life that have pointed out to you that you seem to be generally quite negative and you complain a lot. Now, remember, like that's going to take quite a bit. By the time it gets to the point where your close family members are pointing those kinds of things out to you, it's not because you've done it once or twice. It's most probably because it's an overriding thing. And then you need to pay attention to that, especially when you realize how important it is from God's perspective. And I get it. I know there is a tendency for us to complain as humans, because there certainly is not a shortage of things to complain about. Like our news feeds are filled with it. So you could have all the ammunition that you need. And there's something weird about sharing it. It sort of gives you that sense of like, okay, at least I've been heard. It gives you this weird, like I've shared my burden. And a weird kind of a strange, like a camaraderie, like we're in this together. I'm complaining to you so that you can agree with me that things are really bad, and then I'm not alone in this. Like, yeah, we all have to suffer. And I'm like, okay, but here's the truth. Complaining actually reveals something that is much deeper. And when we start paying attention to what is deeper, then we start seeing how serious this is and why God takes it so seriously. Because your circumstances could change. Your life season could change. But if you don't sort out what's underneath, the circumstances are not going to get you to stop complaining. You'll find something else to complain about. You'll be in a completely new season, completely new circumstances, but guess what? You'll still be complaining. And that's what we want to guard against. That's what we want to see, like, how can we uncover what it is? What's the heart behind the complaining? The stuff that's below the surface. Because what that reveals, well, that holds the key. And what we'll find is that there are some common things there. So our complaints are fueled by our own fears, by insecurities. Sometimes it's fueled by envy. Sometimes it's fueled just by pride and selfishness. Sometimes there is some entitlement or jealousy. And often, I get it, often it's this feeling of injustice, of like, but this is not right. And that gives us the excuse to then complain about it. And those are some of the things we want to look at. Because even when it comes to injustice, when we walk down that path properly and we understand that God says, vengeance is mine, well, we're not supposed to be allowing it to taint us and those around us. But there is a way that we can deal with it in a godly way. So, unfortunately, when you get under the surface of our complaints, the overarching thing that it reveals, and this is the scary part, it reveals our unhappiness and this sense where we feel that God is not in control, that He doesn't really have a handle on everything that's going on here. Like, maybe He's not doing such a great job because I can find a lot of things to complain about. And when we see it like that, well, then we understand it's not just a personality issue that we have. It's not just that I am generally a complainer. It's that I am struggling to trust. I'm struggling to put my confidence, my faith into God and to believe that He really does know what's going on. Now, this is one of the clearest instructions that we have in Scripture. So when Philippians 2 verse 14 says, do all things without complaining and without disputing, without arguing, well, then we have to pay attention. So it's not some things. It's not like when life is easy, then it's okay. It's no. It's in the situation when it's difficult, don't complain about it. It's when you have an issue, don't pick a fight. Don't always have an opinion just because you want drama or because you want to share what you think on the subject. You'll know some people that they have an opinion on every single subject. So they are like negative professors. Like, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. They will know exactly what's wrong with that thing. And those are not great traits to have. So when we can start getting away from that, even though complaining is built into our DNA and negativity is much, much easier, we see that if I'm not actively working against that, if I am not filling my life with other positive, healthy, godly things that bring gratitude and thankfulness, then I'm always going to tend more towards the negative and the complaining. And I get it because I know exactly what that's like. And it's not just that I know what that's like, it's that the scriptures speak about that. They give us this incredible story, and God uses the nation of Israel as this ideal poster nation. And He says, okay, so here, I'm going to take them and I'm going to take them on this journey and just watch the human nature come out and then see how you can relate to it. So the nation of Israel are slaves in Egypt and life is tough. Like there's a lot to complain about. And then Moses comes along. He does all these miracles, and you can read about it in Exodus. And as he does these miracles, the miracles grow and grow, and they are massive. They're incredible. Leading up to the point where Pharaoh says, okay, you're free. You can go now. And they're like, what? And then you see this journey. They leave. And they're like, but this is impossible. Because if you think about it, as a nation of like laborers, and Egypt at that time was one of the most formidable nations with one of the most feared armies. How are the slaves going to free themselves from the Egyptians? Like, it's impossible. You can't beat the Egyptian army. You're not going to do it. And here we are, we're free. But this is back of the mind, worried the whole time. They're going to come and get us. And when they get to the Red Sea, and they've got the Red Sea in front of them, and they see the dust of the Egyptian army coming, they're like, well, this is it. So you've taken us out of Egypt because there weren't enough graves there. So now we're just going to die here. We're going to be slaughtered by the Egyptian army. And then the Red Sea parts, and they walk through, and the Egyptian army is killed. Now, on the other side of the Red Sea, you would think that the nation of Israel, yes, they celebrated, but like the next day, the next week, that they would still remember that. And they'd be like, that was our biggest problem. Like, it was a really big problem. How do we defeat the Egyptian army? Impossible. Now it's done. Wow. It doesn't matter what's in front of us. God will look after us. That wasn't their attitude. That wasn't their approach. What did they start doing? They started complaining. They then said, we don't have food. We don't have water. Our clothing is going to wear out. We don't. Look at all these problems. And every single time, God would answer, manna from heaven, pheasants that would come so they have meat. Their sandals would never wear out. A rock gives them water. And you're sort of like but the whole time there's this complaining. And what does Moses say in Exodus chapter 16, verse 8? He says it, and this is the crux of it. He says, your complaints are not against us. It's not against me and Aaron. Your complaints are against the Lord. And what they were saying is, we don't think that God is going to look after us. So they were accusing God of neglecting them after everything that he had done. And now it's easy to point fingers at the nation of Israel, but I know that I have done exactly the same. I know the times in my life where I've wrestled, times where I've felt like, this is it. Things are not going to work out. It's impossible to solve this situation, whatever my personal crisis was at the time. And I would then go to the Lord and I'd be complaining. I'd be complaining in my heart, complaining in my mind, leading up to it. And then I see the Lord's provision. I see his care. I see how he solves this impossible problem in the most beautiful way. And I'm grateful and I celebrate. And the next week, the next problem that comes, the next crisis, guess what? I have a fresh set of doubts. I have fresh complaints. And it's like, yes, thank you, Lord. You sorted that one out. But now look at this. How is this going to get sorted out? And I know I can associate, I can empathize with the nation of Israel. I know what that feels like. And I'm pretty sure you do too. And so how do we move away from that? How do we move away from accusing God of neglecting us, of accusing God of not doing a good enough job, of accusing him of not coming through when we need him in the time frame that we set up? How do we stop doing that? And I want to bring this in because it's so important. There are two very distinct, different kinds of complaints. One is when we complain about God, where we are actually saying, yeah, I don't think he's doing a great job. I don't think he's got this. I don't think he's even involved or interested in this. And we take those complaints and we sort of disseminate them to everyone around us, where we're complaining all the time about everything, which really shows a lack of trust and faith. And that kind of horizontal complaining, that is the kind that we have to cut out. That's the kind of complaining that God says, well, don't. Stop complaining. But then there's a different kind of complaining. And that's when we actually take our complaints to God. And that's exactly what David did, what Job did, what many of the writers of the scriptures did. So yes, they had difficult circumstances, they had lots to complain about, but they took it to him. And when you take your complaints to God, it changes. Because now I can't complain about nonsense. I can't just want to do it because I'm in a negative mood or because I feel like I'm going to get some sort of response that's going to fuel me and make me feel better. That's not the purpose of complaining to God. When I take my complaints to him, I have to filter out all of the ones that I know are just filled with a whole lot of negative motives. And those complaints then more become concerns. They become the deep things that I really am worried about. And when I take those to God, well, that's what he wants. So instead of it drawing me away from him, it draws me closer to him. Instead of creating a barrier between us, there is now a beautiful moment of me relying on him. And that's why in Psalm 142, verse 1 and 2, listen to what David says. So Psalm 142, he says, I cry out to the Lord with my voice. With my voice to the Lord, I make my supplication, my pleas. I pour out my complaints before him, and I declare before him my trouble. That's a beautiful place to take your concerns, because not only are you going to filter them, but God is also going to do something about them in the best possible way, in the most beautiful way. And that's what we see with Job. So Job, again, he had a tremendous amount to complain about, and all of his friends sitting around him were complaining, and they were directing their complaints to Job. But what was Job doing? Job was taking all of their complaints and taking his own complaints and directing them to the Lord. And what does the Lord call him? Righteous. Even though he was complaining, but it was because he was complaining to God, not about him. And when we can see the difference there, well, that's when I short-circuit the other danger of complaining. Because what complaining does is it takes me into a negative mindset. And when I have a negative mindset, all I see is what is wrong about everything around me. And I miss out on the great things that God is doing in those difficult circumstances. When I'm praying about my circumstances and when I am taking those concerns to the Lord, well, then I'm looking out for his answers. I'm looking out to see how he's going to use this situation where complaining distorts my view of life and what's going on. Well, that's where trust clears that vision. And I see it so differently. So he has a plan. Let's take up this plan to challenge our complaints. So the first step is to catch yourself complaining. It's just realize when you're doing it and ask, was that just a complaint? Like for no reason? Was that a Philippians 2:14 don't complain situation? And then secondly, once you do that, ask the question, what's under it? What am I really complaining about? What is the real motive beneath it? It's probably not the thing that's right there in front of you. See if you can uncover for yourself if it is fear or insecurity or injustice or pride or jealousy or whatever it is. Try and find it. And then you want to speak to the Lord about it. Not just about the actual complaint. So don't just take like the words of the complaint and say, Lord, sorry about that. But ask him to deal with what's fueling the complaint, the thing that's underneath. And then finally, you want to replace it with trust. And you want to say, Lord, yes, this is the situation, and this is how I'm emotionally responding to it. But I want to trust you in this. And when you do that, then you realize that trust sounds very different to complaining. So take the same circumstances, whatever it is that you're facing, and instead of having this negative approach to it, rather take a trusting approach to it, a faithful, a godly approach to it. And I know that's not always easy, like I get it, but it's great to be reminded of that. Because when I have a trust approach, my language changes because my thinking has changed. And instead of asking, well, why me? Why do I have to go through this? I then get to ask, well, Lord, what is it that you want to teach me through this? Because I know that there is a reason. And instead of saying, well, this isn't fair, we get to say, well, Lord, I know that you are always faithful. Instead of saying, I hate this season of my life, I wish it was over, I wish I was never in this situation, we can say, Lord, please, will you just be with me through this? Will you just help me? Because I'm going to need you. And when we start approaching all of the bad, the negative, the ugly things in life like that, they become such beautiful growth opportunities for our faith, because then we mature in it. And somebody who just complains all the time, it probably sounds like a toddler. Somebody who can go through a tough time and not complain, but be faithful, wow, what a beautiful heart. And it's possible. It's possible. So it's not just about stopping our complaining. It's cutting it out at the root. So that instruction from Philippians 2:14, that is so clear that it'll be fresh. And it'll be like, okay, yes, while I'm figuring out God's will for my life, here's a really clear instruction that I can follow. And one that is going to bring great fruit to my life and to all of those around me. So if you're wondering, where can I start with God's will for what He wants me to do? Well, maybe start here. Start with the instructions that He's already clearly given. And when you can cut out the complaining and you can take your concerns to the Lord and replace that negativity with trust, well, then you'll see the great work that God is going to do in the very circumstances that you were complaining about.